There's a particular glow around the generation who grew up in the 1970s. Not the polished, filtered kind of glow we see today, but something rougher, louder, sun-baked and wild. Picture it. A screen door slams behind you, the smell of cut grass in the air, and a parent who doesn't ask where you're going, just reminds you to be home before the streetlights flicker on. No tracking, no check-ins, no constant supervision wrapped around your day like bubble wrap. Just freedom and the danger that naturally came with it. Because childhood back then wasn't scheduled. It wasn't padded or safety-proofed or narrated by adults. It was an open field, unpredictable, unsupervised, beautifully unstructured. You learned quickly where the good sticks were, which streets to avoid, who you could trust, and how far you could push a bike before gravity took over. And here's the part most people overlook. That lack of control from adults didn't weaken them, it forged them. Those scraped knees weren't just injuries. They were early lessons in courage. The silence of being alone wasn't emptiness. It was the birthplace of imagination. The 1970s didn't just raise children. It built a kind of human resilience we're still trying to understand. If you were a kid in the 1970s, you didn't need a planner. Your childhood was the plan. Not a single adult stood over your shoulder telling you what to do or who to be. Your summer didn't come color-coded or stacked with activities printed on laminated sheets. It began when you stepped outside, barefoot on warm pavement, and ended when the sun dipped low enough to turn the whole world gold. This was freedom, but not the gentle, curated kind we romanticize today. This freedom demanded competence. You woke up, ate cereal out of a scratched plastic bowl, and the world opened like a door waiting to be walked through. You grabbed your bike sometimes without shoes, always without a helmet, and you didn't return until hunger reminded you you had a home. There were no phones to check in with. No Life 360 tracking your route. Your sense of direction lived in the soles of your feet, in the way the sidewalk cracked behind Mrs. Jackson's yard, in the shortcut through the field behind the old power station. Maps weren't on screens, they were engraved in memory. And something extraordinary happened because of that. Freedom forced creativity. Without curated entertainment, you had to invent it. A pile of sticks became a fortress. A muddy ditch became a battlefield. A cardboard box became a universe with its own laws and villains. Neuroscientists call this executive function, the ability to plan, adapt, solve problems without instruction. But back then, it wasn't a term. It was life. Independence wasn't a choice for you. It was oxygen, and every afternoon spent navigating your own tiny world. Wired your brain for the kind of self-direction most adults spend years trying to relearn. Childhood in the 1970s didn't come with emotional airbags. There was no adult stepping in to say, "Use your words." No teacher crouching beside you to referee hurt feelings. No parent pausing a game to make sure everyone felt included. If you got into an argument, you navigated it at eye level, kid to kid. You learned fast who held grudges, and who forgot everything after a 5-minute break. You figured out which jokes made people laugh, and which ones cut too deep. Nobody explained tone of voice. You learned it by watching the way a friend kicked at the dirt when you'd gone too far. This wasn't just survival. It was early training in social intelligence. Psychologists today call it micro-expression reading, catching the flicker of annoyance in someone's eyes, the hesitation in their voice, the tiny pause that says, "You hurt me," even without words. Kids now get told what their friend is feeling. You had to decode it, and with no adult to run to, resolution had to come from within the group. Apologizing wasn't a script. It was a negotiation of pride, hurt, belonging. Forgiveness was earned, not instructed. All of this shaped you long before you knew the word psychology. It taught you the rhythm of human behavior, the unspoken rules of closeness and distance, how to sense tension before a single word was spoken. Those playground conflicts weren't just memories. They were the early architecture of emotional intelligence, built from scraped egos instead of scraped knees. There's a moment every 1970s kid remembers. You wander into the kitchen. Nothing left to do. No screens calling your name. No infinite scroll to disappear into. You look at your mom and say, "I'm bored." And she doesn't drop everything to entertain you. She doesn't hand you a device, a schedule, or a solution. She just says one simple sentence, "Go find something to do." At first, boredom felt like an ache, a restless itch beneath the skin, a heaviness in the room when there was nothing to distract you. But that silence, it did something unusual. When there was no stimulation coming from the outside, the inside switched on. You organized your baseball cards. You lay in the grass and watched clouds morph into dragons. You drew maps to places you'd never actually visit. Your friend called, bored too, and somehow two bored minds made magic. What felt like emptiness was actually a doorway. Neuroscientists now call this the default mode network, the brain state responsible for creativity, imagination, problem solving, a state modern kids rarely enter because boredom today is treated like a fire to be put out instantly. But boredom didn't break you. It built you. It taught your brain to generate ideas instead of consume them, to create worlds, not scroll through them, to sit in the quiet long enough to hear your own mind speak. The 1970s didn't shield children from boredom, it leveraged it. And in that space, creativity didn't just grow, it bloomed. Risk, in the 1970s, wasn't a theory. It was physical, breath-holding, bruise-colored, real. You climbed trees so high the ground looked like a rumor. You tested branches with your weight, learning exactly which ones held firm and which ones whispered danger beneath your feet. No adult shouted warnings from below. Your heartbeat was your safety instructor. You raced downhill on a bike with no helmet, wind slicing your eyes, knuckles white on the handlebars, until the day you let go just to prove you could. Sometimes you stuck the landing, sometimes the gravel won. Either way, the lesson was earned, not told. Modern children learn about danger in slideshows and rulebooks. You learned it through proximity, through skin, speed, adrenaline. Your nervous system didn't just hear about risk, it developed a calibration for it. You discovered the difference between truly dangerous and just scary, between a thrill worth chasing and a fall you'd regret for weeks. That kind of wisdom isn't theoretical, it's somatic, stored in muscle, memory, instinct. Psychologists now call this experiential risk processing, the internal compass built from trial and consequence. But back then, it had a simpler name. Growing up, the scrapes healed, the fear faded, but the instinct stayed, that quiet, lifelong ability to sense risk and face it without flinching. In the 1970s, emotions had no instant exit. You couldn't disappear into a screen. You couldn't text a friend to unload your feelings, or scroll through strangers on the internet to distract your mind. There was no dopamine drip waiting in your pocket. When something hurt, you felt it. You came home from school stung by something someone said, or with a test score that made your stomach drop. You walked into your room, closed the door, and sat with the weight of your own thoughts. Maybe you punched a pillow. Maybe you stared at the ceiling until the anger softened. Maybe you cried quietly without posting it, without validation. But slowly, inevitably, the storm inside your chest passed on its own. You learned something modern life rarely teaches. Feelings are waves, not cages. They rise, peak, and fall without needing to be solved immediately. Today, kids are taught to express emotions, but many were never taught to contain them, to breathe through discomfort, to trust that pain isn't permanent. Psychologists now call this emotional self-regulation, one of the strongest predictors of adult resilience, decision-making, and relationship stability. But for you, It wasn't a skill you trained for. It was the only option available. There was no escape button, so you developed an internal one. You learned to let anger cool instead of explode. You learned disappointment wouldn't end you. You learned silence wasn't punishment, it was processing. And that quiet endurance, that private, unseen emotional stamina, became the backbone of who you are today. If you were a kid in the 1970s, anticipation wasn't frustration, it was fuel. You waited all week for your favorite show. Thursday night came with butterflies, because if you missed it, there was no replay, no stream, no watch later. You timed your life around the opening theme song, and when the episode cut to a cliffhanger, you carried that story in your chest for 7 long days. Christmas was the same. The calendar moved slowly, soundtracked by jingling commercials and the smell of pine. Presents waited beneath the tree like sealed universes, and you counted sleeps, not seconds. Every moment of patience stretched your internal world. It taught you that desire doesn't need immediate relief. That excitement grows when it isn't instantly satisfied. Psychologists call this delayed gratification, and research now links it to lower addiction, stronger discipline, better financial decisions, and more stable relationships. But for you, it wasn't neuroscience. It was Saturday morning or December 25th arriving exactly on schedule. Waiting didn't weaken you. It expanded you. It taught your mind to hold hunger without panic, to let excitement build into something sweeter, to work, hope, and earn instead of expect. Modern life chases instant rewards, but you were raised by slow magic, a rhythm where good things took time, and the waiting was part of the joy. Fast forward a few decades, and you can still see the 1970s in the way many of these adults move through the world. When something breaks, they don't panic, they troubleshoot. When life gets loud, they don't crumble, they steady themselves. When the unexpected arrives, they don't freeze, they adapt. Because for them, resilience isn't philosophy, it's muscle memory. These are people who know how to make something out of nothing, who don't need constant instruction or reassurance to take the next step. Their nervous systems were trained in real time, through boredom, through risk, through self-regulated emotion. And today, it shows. At work, they can take feedback without collapsing into self-doubt. They solve problems instead of waiting for rescue. They stay grounded during chaos because they've lived through scarier falls, ones involving bicycles, tree branches, and a complete lack of parental buffering. In relationships, they don't demand constant validation. They understand that feelings fluctuate, that conflict isn't catastrophe, that solitude can be nourishing, not lonely. They are adults who trust themselves, not because someone told them they were capable, but because they proved it to themselves 100 small times before they turned 12. They carry with them a quiet competence, a low burning confidence, a steadiness that doesn't need to be announced. It's the unmistakable signature of a childhood built on freedom, friction, and real-world experience. A generation shaped not by protection, but by participation. Strength always has a shadow, and the independence that shaped this generation came with a subtle price. When you learn to handle everything alone, asking for help can feel like failure. Vulnerability can feel like weakness. You grow a spine made of steel, but sometimes the heart inside it goes unacknowledged. Many 1970s kids became adults who don't complain when they're hurting, who power through stress instead of speaking up, who apologize before they express a need. Not because they don't feel deeply, but because they were raised to cope silently. When no adult was available to mediate childhood conflict, you learned self-soothing instead of emotional sharing. You became the calm one, the capable one, the one who survives without leaning. But privately, it can become lonely. Years of self-reliance can make intimacy confusing. Letting someone in feels like handing over a weapon. Accepting support feels unnatural, like a skill never taught. And conflict in adulthood can strike old patterns. Instead of communicating pain, you withdraw. Instead of asking for reassurance, you endure. Instead of breaking down, you power through until you're numb. This is the side of the story that often goes unspoken. Independence is a gift, but it can also become armor. Strength can become solitude. Resilience can become silence. And many from this generation carry both truths at once: the pride of self-sufficiency and the ache of rarely being held. Not broken, not damaged, just built to stand alone even when they no longer have to, because surviving without support was once necessary. Learning to receive support now, that is the evolution. So what do we do with all of this? With a childhood built from scraped knees, bored afternoons, and lessons carved into skin instead of textbooks, we don't romanticize it blindly, and we don't dismiss it as outdated. We carry it wisely. Because the world today is louder, faster, more wired than ever. Children are rarely bored. Adults are rarely still. And somewhere between notifications and never-ending distraction, patience, resilience, and inner calm have begun to feel like artifacts. But you lived the blueprint. You remember what it felt like to wait, to risk, to solve your own problems, to sit with emotions until they softened instead of exploding. And maybe the most powerful thing this generation can do now is not just survive independently, but teach the world how to reconnect with that kind of inner steadiness. Maybe resilience isn't just something you inherited, maybe it's something you can pass on. So tell me in the comments, which part of this story feels like your childhood? Where do you see yourself in these memories? And if you want more videos like this, more psychology, more reflection, more truth told quietly, hit subscribe before you go, because this isn't just nostalgia, it's knowledge, it's experience, it's a generation remembering itself, and teaching the rest of us how to stand strong, not because the world is safe, but because we learned how to meet it.